Dietrich Enns and Grant Wolfram. Will that be enough to find a top lefty in the 2026 Orioles bullpen? We'll break that down coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Wednesday, January 14th, 2026, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we continue our stretch of our Orioles season player review series from 2025. And today we're going to talk about two players in one episode because with most relief pitchers, especially guys who weren't in the Orioles bullpen for the entirety of the year, they need more like one segment than one episode. But I wanted to talk about a couple of lefties, Dietrich Enns and Grant Wolfram. Both showed some promise, probably Enns more than Wolfram when they got their chances in 2025. And both are still on the Orioles 40-man roster in 2026. And at least one, I'd almost guarantee, is going to be on the opening day roster. But are the two of those guys, along with the potential for Keegan Aiken, enough to say the O's have good enough lefties in their bullpen? We'll try to figure that out by breaking down both of their seasons. Plus, stick around at the end of the show, as I will announce the three winners of the Locked On Orioles giveaways that we did on the show last week. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook of the NFL, and grab your Profit Boost pack every NFL playoff game day. So we're breaking down the seasons of some lefty relievers. Let's start today's episode with Dietrich Enns, who kind of came out of nowhere to have a really good run with the Orioles last season. Again, with these player review series episodes, we'll do what went right, what went wrong, and then kind of the biggest question for the player as they head into 2026. So starting with Dietrich Enns and what went right for the left-hander is that, well, he was able to come back over to the U.S. and have success. Enns, a 34-year-old left-handed pitcher who had been pitching in Japan for a couple years. Then he was in Korea with the LG Twins in 2024, all as a starting pitcher, having okay, but not even great numbers. He didn't, on paper, look like a guy who was in his mid-30s, going to be headed back to the U.S., but he signed a minor league deal, kind of a split contract with the Detroit Tigers last offseason, and he was able to get himself back to the big leagues with the Tigers. Pitched in 7 games through 17 2/3 innings early in the year for Detroit. Now, it wasn't very good. It was a 5.6 ERA, but with a 3.59 FIP, it showed that, hey, he was getting a little unlucky, and the stuff is at least major league playable. He went up and down with the Tigers for a bit and eventually was DFA'd right around the deadline, and the Orioles kind of jumped the waiver wire, sent some cash over to the Tigers to acquire Enns. Now, the O's, as we know, traded away 4 relievers at the deadline, plus lost Felix Bautista to a season-ending injury. So essentially, their 5 most reliable of their 8 relievers were gone in the span of about a week. They needed arms. They had space to pick up interesting arms, and Enns was a cheap version of one of those. And we looked around like Dietrich Enns, 34, had been in Asia, not pitching super well this year. I mean, I didn't mind giving him a chance with the O's out of it, but it was kind of like, okay, we'll see what happens here. And he comes to Baltimore and was honestly the Orioles' most trusted reliever after the deadline. With the O's down the stretch, Enns pitched in 17 games. He made 1 start as an opener, the rest in relief. He threw 28 2/3 innings and posted a 3.14 ERA. He had a really strong 28% strikeout rate with a 9% walk rate, maybe just a touch above league average. Opponents hit just 241 against him in an Orioles uniform. His 26 innings pitched led all Orioles relievers after August 1st. He was 3rd in leverage rating, meaning some of the highest leverage spots you're coming into, and was 1st in Fangraph's clutch rating after August 1st, which measures how much better you do in quote unquote clutch situations versus how you do in an average situation coming in as a reliever. I mean, Tony Mansolino turned to him, and Enns, I mean, most times he delivered. He came through. He was really able to pitch in every role. In 9 of his 17 outings, he went at least 2 innings with the Orioles. It gave him some length out of the pen, including that one outing where he started and was the opener and went 2 2/3 innings as an opener and allowed just 1 run. Multiple of those multi-inning outings came in extra innings where he would come in and like pitch the 10th and the 11th of a game to help the Orioles stay in it. And he did have 2 saves. One of them was of kind of the old school 3-inning save variety. And the other one was a normal 3-out save in the 9th inning, holding a small lead. Like he kind of did it all for the O's. And what makes you like Enns as a left-hander is he has the stuff to get righties out. He's not just a platoon reliever. He goes after the guys on the opposite side, which allows him to pitch multiple innings, which allows him to go 2 2/3 as an opener. He can turn the lineup over. He can go through the lineup. He can even pitch to a guy twice in a game because he has all that different stuff to get righties out. It's a fastball, a 4-seamer around 95 with almost 18 inches of induced vertical break. It had a really good swing and miss rate in September. He's got a changeup at 85 that guys whiffed at 40% of the time in August. Also kind of a big slow curveball that he can drop in for a strike at any time. And overall, a 110 stuff plus on the season when 100 is average. That is pretty good to work with for a 34-year-old reliever, really for any reliever of any age. I mean, righties slugged 304 with a 254 WOBA against Enns. That is him doing some really good work against opposite-handed hitters. I mean, it was a 290 slugging by righties against Enns when he was with the Orioles. It led to some low hard hit rates, some low barrel rates against him. Like he looked like he had the stuff to navigate a lineup. And if he even wanted to be stretched back into a starter, it was like even in his mid-30s, maybe he could do it. And that was really exciting for Dietrich Enns. Unfortunately, there is a what went wrong side of this. And while he was really good against righties, it was the odd situation of a left-handed pitcher who couldn't really get left-handed hitters out. And that can become a concern. He was, again, mostly 4-seam fastball that he threw to his left-handed hitters, and it was still a solid pitch, but his cutter was the thing he liked to go to as well against lefties, and it just was not good. He did not have a left-handed hitter have a single swing and miss against his cutter in September. Lefty slugged .833 against that pitch with the Orioles, and all season, a .618 slugging against his cutter. Now, stats that show results against single pitches, not the best way to evaluate guys, but that is bad enough where you can tell it's really, really bad. And you would think a guy like him would have a slider. Most lefties throw sliders to left-handers. It's just not a pitch he had. It's a shorter, harder cutter, and that thing just got demolished. So for Enns, what are the biggest questions for him heading into 2026? I would say number one is, will he definitely have a bullpen spot, right? He was great last year for the Orioles, and they agreed to a little contract restructure to keep him around. He agreed to a $2.5 million salary for 2026, and the Orioles added a $3.5 million team option tacked on for 2027. So if Enns is at least serviceable and stays with the organization and stays healthy, it wouldn't surprise me if they picked up a cheap $3.5 million option to bring him back for another season. That kind of tells me he's more than just an interesting bubble kind of depth reliever for this team, that the Orioles, I think, see that he has a spot at the very least in this opening day bullpen. What his role will be is a question because he can pitch in so many different roles. But I do think when you compare him to Keegan Aiken and Grant Wolfram, who we're going to get to in a second, as the other two left-handed relievers on this 40-man roster, I think Enns is the best of those three, and right now is pretty secure in the Orioles' projected opening day bullpen. Now, the question for him is going to be, can he find a new pitch to do a better job of getting lefties out? Is it super valuable that he's a multi-inning lefty who dominates righties? That is all great stuff you want in your bullpen. But at the very least, you want him to be serviceable lefty-lefty. If he's terrible, well, he's still not going to help you as much as you want. It's going to have to either be changing how he throws his cutter or just dumping it and throwing a slider instead. He's going to have to learn a better slider to throw against left-handers. If he doesn't, he might still have issues. Either that or maybe throws more sinkers against left-handers is something he could do as well. But the current version of that cutter was just so bad. I'm not sure that he can stick with that pitch. So again, I think he's going to have a spot. I mean, let me know here in the Locked On Orioles comments here on YouTube. Like, would you fully write in pen Dietrich Enns' name into the opening day bullpen? I think I would, just because the best lefty. But that does open up, I think, the final question for him, which is he good enough to be the best lefty in a bullpen of a team that certainly in the Orioles has playoff aspirations in 2026? And while I think Enns is good and going to be helpful, I would argue no. I think at the very least, this team would need to acquire a lefty reliever at the deadline to be better down the stretch. But I still think they're one relief pitcher short this offseason. Now, I am, full disclosure, recording this here on Sunday, even though this episode goes out Wednesday because of some timing and recording issues. So maybe they've got another lefty between Sunday and Wednesday. But I still think they need one more left-hander. Now, there's not a lot of them left out there. The best ones, old friend Danny Coulomb, Justin Wilson, who just announced he's considering retirement, and then Taylor Rogers. And then there's some other guys, that technically throw with their left hand, but I don't really know how many guys they're going to get out at this point. That's Andrew Chafin, Brent Suter, John King, Jalen Beeks, and Tim Meza are the other guys who are still free agents as of Sunday. I think Rogers, Coulomb, and Wilson would all be upgrades over Enns, I should say, to be the best lefty in the Oriole bullpen and would be helpful. There's also the trade guys, like the Orioles have been connected to Cardinals lefty Jojo Romero, who's a trade candidate. He would certainly be an upgrade and give them a better lefty at the back end of that bullpen. For me, that wouldn't push Enns off the roster. That would just push him into more of a spot where he doesn't have to be used in as many high leverage spots. He can do more of this multi-inning kind of bridge stuff that he seemed to be really, really good at with the O's at the end of last year. That's still something I would look for. But for Enns in a vacuum, I think the O's definitely found something here with him. The question is, did they also find something with Grant Wolfram, right? A little bit younger, a little bit less seasoned, didn't have as much time with the O's last year, but you look at the raw stuff and you can really get excited by Wolfram. We'll talk about him coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. Because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts you can apply to the bets you like most. The boosts, they let you kind of lean into your game day instincts, back in momentum, defense, quarterback play, or even coaching. You make your picks, then apply your profit boost to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. We'll recap the season of Grant Wolfram in just a moment, but first I want to thank you for making Locked On Orioles your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You already live your team every day. Now it's time to take it up a level and go ad-free. You can join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Orioles with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 per month, or to save a little bit of money, $50 per year. Just go to lockedonorioles.supercast.com or check the link that'll be down here in the show notes to learn more about joining the Everydayer Club. So for the Orioles, Dietrich Enns was really good as a lefty. Grant Wolfram, I would say, had his moments as a lefty out of the Orioles pen last season. So let's start with, for Grant Wolfram, the 29-year-old left-handed pitcher, what went right for him with the O's in the 2025 season? Well, what went right is that he's got some legitimate stuff from the left side. It's a 110 stuff plus, was the second best in the Orioles bullpen down the stretch. His 107 pitching plus, best of the group. It's a four-seam fastball and a sinker that both sit at 96 miles an hour and get up to 98 plus at certain times when he really ramps it up there. It's a slider and a curveball that both have swing and miss rates over 32%. Huge stuff numbers on both those breaking balls. It's, the big long levers from Wolfram. He's coming right at you. He's 6'7". It's it can't be a comfortable at bat, especially for a left-handed hitter, if you are in there in the box against Grant Wolfram. And the Orioles did a good job of going to find him. They made a trade back in April when they sent Daz Cameron to the Brewers. The Brewers desperately needed an outfielder. They get Daz Cameron, and they send this kind of intriguing AAA arm in Grant Wolfram back to the Orioles. Now, Wolfram did debut with the O's in late April and didn't look great in those first couple of outings, but he had minor league options. He still has a couple minor league option years remaining going into 2026, which gives him roster flexibility. And he was versatile. He had 6 outings of at least 2 innings pitched out of the Oriole bullpen. And overall, like, the stats aren't going to scream at you, right? He made his major league debut, 21 outings, 26 2/3 innings, a 5.40 ERA, but a 3.59 FIP tells you that there was some bad batted ball luck, right? He had a 3.59 FIP, a 3.54 expected ERA, which goes off the StatCast stats. And when you look a little deeper at how guys were contacting the baseball against Wolfram, it's a 3.5% barrel rate. That is extremely low. It's a 37% hard hit rate. That's low. It's a super high 50% ground ball rate. So even if guys hit it hard sometimes, generally on the ground, worst that can happen there is usually just a single. He was avoiding barrels, avoiding hard contact with good stuff. Really what he has to do is just channel the strike zone a little bit more. Like, that was, I would say, the one and only issue. A 23% strikeout rate could go up, but you don't really want to be running an 11.3% walk rate, which is what Wolfram had in those 21 appearances with the Orioles last season. It's something that has plagued him at times throughout the minor leagues as well, when he was coming up in the Rangers system and then went over to Milwaukee in 2025. He's got something in there. He hasn't put it all together yet, but he absolutely has something in there. I loved watching him at times this season, and it was fun. But let's move to the what went wrong for Grant Wolfram, because it was also a very inconsistent season. Now, number one on the inconsistent list is the command, and especially in his early outings with the Orioles, he didn't know where the ball was going. In his first 6 big league outings with the O's this year, 7 2/3 innings, 10 earned runs, 13 hits, 9 strikeouts, 6 walks, and 2 homers allowed. Now, that's a high amount of walks, but really when you watched Wolfram in those outings, it was even worse because the ball was either way out of the strike zone, easily taken for a ball, or it was right down the middle and being clobbered for those 13 hits and those 2 home runs. He couldn't command his breaking balls, neither the slider nor the curveball. They were all over the place. You know, the four-seamer had good velocity, but not a great movement profile, so it's harder to get away with that pitch if you are missing in the middle of the zone, which he was doing early, and that led to just a really bad first 6 outings. He went back down to AAA for a while because he had those options, and then he came back, and to give him credit, he really settled in. His next 13 outings in the big leagues, 17 1/3 innings pitched, 18 hits, but only 2 earned runs in 17 1/3 innings with 21 strikeouts to only 6 walks. The command was much better. The stuff looked better. The curveball and the slider were disgusting. He was locating them both so much better in that stretch. And he really looked like, he was one of the best pitchers in the Oriole bullpen during the middle part of the season. Now, unfortunately, Wolfram didn't get as many chances as maybe he should have to make a mark. 21 outings, he probably should have gotten more than that, especially after the Orioles traded away all those relievers at the deadline. We still saw Wolfram back in the bullpen, but he kind of got caught up in a weird roster spot where Wolfram had back-to-back pretty tough outings in September, and then the Orioles claimed left-hander Jose Castillo off waivers. He didn't have options left. They wanted to give him a look, and Wolfram coming off bad outings, so they sent Wolfram back down to AAA on September 16th, and he did not return for the final 2 weeks of the season. Now, Castillo had a couple good outings, but eventually was DFA'd and didn't amount to a whole lot for the Orioles. And yeah, like, Wolfram was still in the organization, but I would have liked, probably in hindsight, 2 more weeks of him getting big league experience instead of Jose Castillo. But the O's are trying to find diamonds in the rough any way they could, and Castillo had a good couple outings there before he was gone. So for Wolfram, the biggest question for him heading into 2026 is, can he get a bullpen spot with this team? Now, since he has minor league options and since he is less proven, he's 3rd on the list of lefties in the pen right now. Behind, I'd put Dietrich Enns number 1, and of course, Keegan Aiken number 2. Aiken's going to get his own episode later this offseason. And especially if the Orioles do add another relief pitcher, and specifically even if it is a lefty like I talked about, I think Wolfram would easily begin the year in AAA Norfolk because he has those options. You can kind of work out some of the command issues. But he's got a chance here to try and show, he's going to be in big league spring training. He's on the 40-man roster. He's got a chance to show out there if he stays on the 40-man. Now, Aiken and Enns are both out of options. So if the O's get to a point where they have those three guys and they have space for two of them on the roster, it's going to be Aiken and Enns, because if you didn't put one of them, you'd have to DFA them. You don't have to DFA Wolfram. You can put them in AAA, and you can keep all three guys in the organization, which means Grant Wolfram is starting behind the 8-ball. But there's a scenario here where he just so outperforms someone like Keegan Aiken, and Aiken's struggles from 2025 kind of bleed into spring training. Maybe the Orioles make the move and they cut ties with Aiken and they give Wolfram that spot, especially if they don't bring in another reliever. There could really be an opening for Grant Wolfram. But overall, I'm a big fan of his stuff. And I do think it's most likely he begins the year in the Norfolk bullpen, getting a lot of high leverage chances for the Tides. And he is, I would, if he stays healthy, I would guarantee he pitches for the Orioles in some capacity in 2026. You're always going to need available up-down relievers with options. And it's nice if they have nasty stuff, which Wolfram has, and have had some success in the majors, which he did have for a stretch with the Orioles last season. I think they're going to go to him for injuries, for fresh arms. And again, there's even a good chance that someone like Aiken just kind of bottoms out and is off the roster, and Wolfram can take a bigger chunk of relief innings next season. I think is a really, really interesting arm for the Orioles to have, to be good depth for them. And I think it'd get some key outs for the O's if he kind of hones in that command in 2026. But that's the season review on both those guys. Let me know here in the YouTube comment section. Do you prefer Enns or Wolfram? Do you think both of them, one of them, neither of them will be in the bullpen on the Orioles opening day roster? Would certainly like to hear from you. And I definitely heard from you all a lot last week, and it was awesome. Let's talk about kind of the feedback and the giveaway and announce the winners. That is coming up next in the final segment. So I really, really want to thank you all out there. As you may know, if you listened to any of the 4 episodes of the show last week, I was able to meet one of my big goals from the end of the year, which was to reach 10,000 subscribers on YouTube by the end of the calendar year 2025. And that is what we did. And that is a thanks to you all. I think by December 30th, we had gotten over 10,000 subscribers. And I promised if we got there, like I do for every 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, I'll do some sort of Orioles memorabilia giveaway. But this time, because it was a big round number with 10,000, and that's a really cool number to get to, I usually only do one winner for the giveaways. This time, we're doing 3 winners to thank you all. Now, all you had to do was enter was 2 things. 1 was to subscribe to the Locked On Orioles podcast on YouTube, and 2 was to leave a comment on any of the 4 episodes last week, just wanting your honest feedback on the show, right? I am a couple days away from my 6-year anniversary of hosting this show, which is insane. I believe I was hired on January 20th of 2020, and then maybe January 30th, I think, was my first episode of Locked On Orioles in 2020. So we're almost the 6-year anniversary of that, which is just insane. This is the 1400th episode number 1400 that I've hosted of Locked On Orioles. That is a crazy amount of podcasts that I have done in 6 years. But, we're turning over a new leaf to a new year. Orioles, with the moves they've made this offseason, we're certainly entering into a new era, you would think, of competition after the, let's call it, disaster that was 2025. And so I thought, hey, let me get some honest feedback from you all. What you like, what you dislike, what you'd like to see on the show, whether you've been with me since the beginning. Those shows were rough back then. Whether you maybe jumped in 2022 or 2023 when the Orioles started to kick things off. I know a lot of people jumped in at the Corbin Burns trade. Maybe you found me at the Pete Alonso signing, right, a month ago, and you've just been with me since then. Really wanted to hear your feedback on the show. And if you did both those things, you were entered to win one of the 3 pieces of the giveaway. So let's first start with, we'll start with some of the feedback I got. Let's keep everyone waiting until the end here to do the 3 winners of the giveaway. But let's start with some of the feedback here. I had a few people asking for kind of stat explainers, right? Asking about stats I give, Stuff Plus and FIP and things that I talk about. I actually have done a handful of episodes talking about specifically hitter stats and then pitcher stats that I talk about that are advanced stats, why I talk about them, explaining them, why they're important. I'm going to link those previous episodes in the show notes for today's episode, so you can go and check those out. But also, I am happy to do more of those. So I've got, between now and opening day, I've got a plan to do at least one more of those episodes, kind of jumping into the stats that I talk about and why they're important. I definitely, I look at baseball from a sabermetric and analytical and data-driven lens, while also having played the game my whole life and loving the game from that side as well. I try to think I mend the two as best as possible, but I also know that a lot of fans didn't grow up with those stats, are unfamiliar with them. I don't want to be gatekeeping those from you all when you're watching the show or listening to the show. I want you to be involved there, at least having an elementary understanding of what those stats are and why they matter and why teams use them and why I use them to evaluate players. So definitely want to keep you in the loop on those. So look forward to more episodes like that. I had some people asking for game highlights on YouTube. I've talked about this before. Unfortunately, MLB is going to take my channel down if I put up game highlights in here. So fortunately, that's not something that's going to happen. I'll talk about it. I'll put up some data visuals and graphics, but game highlights from that night, what I'm talking about, is just not something that can or will happen. Had some people asking for longer episodes on the show. Just so you know, it is a network initiative here at Locked On to keep the episodes between about 27 and 33 minutes for every episode. Now, sometimes they'll leak a little bit shorter or a little bit longer than that, but if you've been with me for a while, you'll notice that at least once a week, if there's a big game during the season, I'll push 35 to 40 minutes in an episode. And especially if I have a guest on, like when I did that year in review episode with Paul Mancano at the end of the year, like we went 45 minutes. If I have a guest on who likes talking Orioles, we're going to go for a while as well. That's once a week, once every other week, you're going to get a longer episode. So I can't make that a plan, but when it happens to get those a little bit longer episodes. Got a lot more feedback about having more guests. Now, this is something I've talked about in the past. I used to have more guests on the show back in the early years, 2020, 21, and 22. For one reason, there was just less to talk about because they were some really bad Orioles teams early on when I was hosting. Also, my kind of outside of this podcast life was a little bit different. Back then, I was not working a 9-to-5 job. Back then, I was doing more freelance broadcasting. I was more available during the day. I just had more time in general to book and interview guests. So I had a lot more guests on the show if you go back to then. Since the Orioles have gotten better, and since I started a 9-to-5 job late in 2022, it's just a lot tougher to book those things, schedule those things, especially to do them regularly. That on top of, with my recording schedule during the season, I've talked about this a little bit before. Game ends at 9:30. I'm basically on here almost immediately, recording, editing, uploading, then getting to bed and getting ready for work the next day. So that makes it really hard to record during the season. If there's big stuff happening like around the draft, the trade deadline, I'll have some guests, or maybe if there's some off days, make it a little bit easier. Like the Orioles have an off day, it's a little bit easier. So I'll try to put in a guest every once in a while during the regular season, but just know that I'd like to have more. It's just really tough. In the off season, I used to have a lot of guests on in the off season. I've kind of drifted away from that a little bit. I would say just as I've gotten more and more comfortable with myself and hosting the show and what I want to talk about, and the team's gotten better and giving me more to talk about. But I heard a lot of feedback on getting more guests every once in a while, whether it's other Locked On hosts or other kind of Orioles media people, players and coaches. Definitely receiving the feedback and going to look to do some more guests as we move forward. Definitely some people who cover the team, it shouldn't be too hard to get them on. I've done a couple shows this offseason with fellow Locked On hosts. We can do more of that. There's especially some asks for some AL East hosts. Player guests and coach guests, they happen when I get offered them. Orioles PR is kind of tough to work with. They also haven't very liked it or liked me in the past when I've kind of gone around them to reach out to players or coaches in the system to get them on the show. They haven't been a fan of that. I don't think they're a fan of the show very much, which that is what it is, which makes it harder to get players and coaches on the show. I would really only have those people on the show in the off season anyway. And at least once in off season, I usually have a player on. That'll probably continue. I don't see it really upticking in players and coaches. When I have them on, I'm super happy to do it. But it's just tough in that sense for a multitude of reasons. But I will definitely try as we're moving forward, just have more guests on the show. A co-host, saw that come up a couple of times. There are a good chunk of Locked On shows across the network that do have multiple hosts. That's a kind of a network decision to be made, like whether or not I would have a co-host, or if I asked for a co-host, it wouldn't just be like me picking someone. They'd kind of have to vet and hire that person. So even if it was said now, it'd be a long process that would drift kind of into the season before that could even happen. Right now, I'm very comfortable doing the show solo and having guests on from time to time, but it's certainly a possibility down the stretch as well that I could have kind of a set co-host for this show. So that was good feedback to have, and definitely going to try to get more guests on the pod. And hey, if you have specific guests you'd want to see on, put them in the comments. Email me, lockedonorioles@gmail.com. Last suggestion was doing a live show, some sort of in-person live show or meetup where people could come, watch a show taping in person, chat with me afterwards. That's something I've thought about and had some ideas about over the past couple of years since the podcast has definitely taken off a bit. And I think it's something I'm going to do here in 2026, especially since I got some good feedback about it here. So what I'm targeting right now, this is very up in the air still, but something during the opening weekend of the season. So opening day is Thursday, March 26th. There's an off day on the 27th, and they have home games at 4 o'clock on Saturday, March 28th, and 1:30 on Sunday, March 29th. I'm thinking one of those 2 days, Saturday or Sunday, the 28th or 29th, somewhere at an establishment near the stadium. It would be like a couple hours before first pitch of whichever game and whichever day is my kind of vague plan right now. So let me know again in the comments or via email if those days, that kind of plan for a live show and then a chat with you all afterwards is something you'd be interested in. That's kind of what I'm targeting right now. So I'd like to hear some feedback on that idea. But without further ado, thank you all so much for the feedback, supporting the show as we go into, this is going to be a crazy thing to say, year 7 of hosting Locked On Orioles, which is just absurd. 1,400 episodes and many more to go. And it is all thanks to you all. And I really, really appreciate the feedback. Take it to heart and try to improve the show as we go into what should be an exciting 2026 season. But 3 giveaways means 3 winners, right? So here are the winners of the giveaway. Number 1, it is Micah Colvin 6727 on YouTube, who commented, quote, "Good show, Connor. Been listening for a few years, normally Apple Podcasts, but sometimes via YouTube also. Good schedule and great topics and insights. Keep up the great work. I didn't think about next year, but man, Skubal or Peralta are the dream number ones." That was on the episode where I also talked about next year's free agent pitching class. Thank you, Micah. You have won one of our giveaways. Next one is Zara's Kid, Xaraskid on YouTube, saying, "I've been an avid listener for a couple years now. You're my go-to podcast for Orioles news. The scheduling doesn't bother me, even though I'm from the Pacific Northwest. I really enjoy your stat breakdowns as well as your insight into the minor league system, as you are my main source for what's going on in Norfolk. Thank you for everything you do. Let's go O's." Congratulations there. You are a winner. And our third winner is Perry Pantha on YouTube, saying, "Regarding pod feedback, I love the deep dive of roster moves, and I'm learning a lot. Can you break down the advanced stats every once in a while? I still don't have a grasp of what stuff is." Yeah, thank you for that. And I addressed that one as well. So those are our 3 winners. Again, Micah Colvin 6727, Zara's Xaraskid, and Perry Pantha on YouTube. If you are a winner, please email me, lockedonorioles@gmail.com. Again, that is lockedonorioles@gmail.com. If you could email me by this time next week at the latest to claim your prize. If you don't email me, might reach out to some other people to be winners instead. What you have a choice to win, it is going to be a first come, first serve for the winner. So if you hear this and you were one of the winners, jump into the email almost immediately because we have 3 giveaways. One, again, is the Jim Palmer replica statue from what is out there in Legends Park out in center field. The second one is the Cal Ripken Jr. Hall of Fame plaque statue. You'll get that one. Or the third one, you can see it kind of back behind me in the top corner, is the Ryan Mountcastle bobblehead giveaway from, I believe, last year. Those are the 3 things that you can choose from. It'll be first come, first serve to see who gets what giveaway. But the 3 of you, make sure to email me, lockedonorioles@gmail.com. That'll do it for today's episode. We got one more episode coming up this week. Tentatively Friday, but could be Thursday as well, talking some Orioles news and notes as the offseason chugs along. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.